welcome to Aggression Week. So reserved in my aggression.
It's a cold aggression.
Bobazama! Grrr! Grrr! That card makes me aggressive. I see it and I'm like, grrr!
Fair enough. Hello and welcome to episode 51 of the Squadron podcast. This week we're going to be talking about aggression, and why you should be playing more of it.
RAR XD. Before we begin that, did you know that Set 3 spoiler season has begun? Go check out the FFG stream. I just want to quickly put it in here to remind you guys that this set for Set 3 and for the sets moving forward, we're going to cover off really important cards like leaders and legendaries or pivotal cards as they come through, and then we'll probably do a big video close to the end of the set, much like our pre-release videos where we talk about more common cards in like a pre-release sealed or even deck construction environment as we get close to the end of the set. So we're not going to be reviewing them all because it does eat up a lot of the time for content, and we would rather just talk about more fun things.
Absolutely.
So diving into it, let's ignore Set 3 because of exploit. And let's look at aggression.
Aggression, baby.
Set 2, grrr. We're going to start off with villain because villain's got some cool stuff, but there's a lot more talking points in hero this set.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We're going to dive into let's cover let's talk Bosk.
Bosk.
Lizard.
Bosk was a really big thing when it first started. It was one of the first leaders that was revealed of the set 2. Everyone was
We hyped him.
nuts for him.
We hyped him hard.
And he is good.
He is still good. He's
still
really
very good.
I'd still classify Bosk as a tier 1.5 deck. And I think the biggest problem with Bosk is that his value just gets outpaced by the other current meta decks in the format. Is the only problem. Like, his value's still incredibly good. Like, you're going to go to locals with Bosk and you're going to hit 3-1s, you're going to hit 2-2s, and you're not really going to dip below that. Mm-hmm. But you're also not going to get higher than that.
Yeah.
Which is I guess like the big pitfall with him. And I guess why do you think that is?
I think it's because at the moment the bounty itself is inherently predictable.
Yeah.
I think because bounty has to be played on a unit and then the unit needs to be defeated, what am I going to do now kind of goes out the window a little bit.
Your opponent knows, and I figured this out in the early days when I was playing into Cad Bane a lot with Bosk, where it was just like put the bounty on and then they'd McClunky.
Oof.
And I'm like, whew, like they kill my unit and I effectively discard a card.
Yeah.
Because the bounty gets put away. So it's stuff like that where you lay your hand on the table, figuratively, because you're putting it, when you put a bounty on, you're putting your hand up and saying, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, your opponent can get around that, like, especially with cards like Deathmark, where if you're low on hand and you Deathmark something, and your opponent goes, sweet. Like, normally this wouldn't be an optimum play, but waylay it to my hand.
Yeah, and you're just like, I really needed that card to roll
I've got
bad.
2 cards in my hand now, and they're like, yeah, I'm Boba. Like,
yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things. The other big thing is a lot of the cards that we were like, these are nuts, are very good cards that actually don't have a place at the moment, and that includes Django Fett and Black Chrysanthemum.
Both are still incredibly good and powerful cards. Hilariously enough, Black Chrysanthemum, his place currently is in Grand Inquisitor because he's a 3 cost for 7 that you can ping and untap, and when he swings, he pings stuff for damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have a mono red and a mono red Grand Inquisitor deck going. That runs a couple of the issue with it is you want to run all these bounties, but you're like, all right, I want guild target.
Yeah. Don't want to pay for Deathmark. Absolutely not. And then your other option is Rich Reward.
Yeah, and for some reason there's no one cost red bounty.
Yeah.
Even though there's a 1 cost red, 1 cost blue bounty, and a 1 cost yellow bounty,
and a 1 cost
and a 1 cost green bounty.
Yep.
But the color that has the bounty synergy, they didn't give a 1 cost bounty to.
There's no 0 cost green bounty either, but the green bounties that we do have are good enough to not need it.
Yeah.
but the red isn't.
We really wanted something that could be worth playing, and really both of the red bounties kind of aren't.
Guild target is fine.
Yeah.
And the main reason guild target is fine is because it costs 0. You can put it onto something and ping them with Dengar, then ping them with Bosk, and that's a nice way to get damage on. But notice how I'm not doing it for its effect. I'm only doing it to get other cards' effects. It's granting me external value and not generating its own, which means if I have nothing on the board and I draw it, it's a dead card. Yeah. And that's terrible.
I wanted a 2-cost red bounty that said bounty, 2-cost red bounty says bounty, draw a card. When this bounty is claimed, you may play it for free on an opponent unit.
Ooh, that would be awesome.
That way you constantly have a bounty up for all these abilities that require bounties, and you need to kill 2 units, and they can get around it by being like, oh, well, I'll waylay it. Cool. It didn't get defeated, it wasn't claimed, so therefore they got around it. Yeah. Or if they don't have another unit on board, you can't play them on anything, so they lose it. There's ways around it, but it's a way to consistently have a bounty on board.
See, the bounty I was looking for was 1-cost red, claim the bounty, deal 1 damage to each of your opponent's units.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just 1.
With all the ping that you have available in that deck, then it's actually quite useful.
And that wouldn't be OP, but it would help that deck survive against decks like Sabine. It would help against those go wide strategies, because you could put that onto something and then you could whittle down that damage to make your pings
and then with
effective.
Bosk you can do 2, which makes it really good.
Which is really good. And it wouldn't be one of those things where it's just like, oh, how do I deal with this? They keep getting it off because they've only got 3 copies of it in their entire deck.
And it comes really good in set 2, where and you can make it a really interesting, really good bounty moving into set 2.
Yeah. You could utilize that against clones, and then Bosk would have a good job against exploit decks and things like that. But it's just something we're missing. And I think Bosk is an awesome leader on paper, and his mechanics are very cool. But the problem with the deck currently is that if your opponent deals with your units and you just draw bounties, you have no payoff and a bunch of dead cards. And that is really rough.
And here's the rough thing that I have going forward with bounty, because yes, we got a new smuggler. We got not a new smuggler. We got a new capture card, which means we're going to be getting new bounties coming through.
Smuggle.
But
more Hondo cards.
Bounty is now limited by Bosk. They cannot make a bounty good, as good, because you get to claim it twice with Bosk. Having that issue means that they can never make bounties that are just really good.
Yeah, we can't.
Unless they find some way to go around it.
We'll never see a bounty that's like 2, put it onto something, and then when you claim the bounty, deal 3 damage. We'll never see that, because if you can kill something with Bosk on the board, then you'd be like, cool, kill this and ping that for 3 and ping that for 3 and kill them as well, and then it would be like, whoa, that is actually very good.
Yeah, if you get these really insane plays with Bosk, and it's like, well, if you make a bounty worth it for everyone else, you make it kind of crazy in Bosk, which is a rough situation going forward. And I have had that situation where a lot of the time I'll look at cards that I have on decks that I have and go, oh, do I want a bounty or something? And the answer is almost unanimously, no.
Yeah, I was building Kylo for this week's gameplay. Go check out the gameplay. And I had the exact same thought process where I run Dengar on the list because I want to go with a Toro Calacan build, and a lot of the time your 1 costs are going to be 2 2s to 2 1s anyway, and I would rather get the potential ability to untap Toro and have a hectic turn by putting deals on him and then untapping him, than I would rather just a bounty. So I was like, oh, I could put bounties into synergize with Dengar, and then I just was like,
why?
Yeah, why would I? I'd rather just put DLs in.
I'm already low on hand. If I'm sitting there with Kyle, I'm like, all right, this is the top deck, and I draw bounties, which
did happen in the gameplay in one of those games. I just drew upgrades when I didn't need to see him, and that's already a problem Kylo can face. You absolutely want to upgrade.
Yeah, you got nothing on board, and you draw a guild target and a hot shot, and you're like, well,
this sucks. So it's one of those things where it's an interesting dynamic where bounties add that deck building question of like, is this really worth it? And just I think currently the answer is no. And that sucks because it is an interesting and new mechanic. But the good news is that does mean we could see in the future stuff that is worth running and really cool stuff. And I'm sure that eventually they will have a creative space where, you know, maybe they can print some really cool bounties and everything else will be at the part where boss won't be insanely OP but will still be playable.
Who thought smuggle was bad and bounties were good?
Yes, and boy howdy were we wrong. It tends to happen with this game just because this game, I think it's a testament to how well this game is designed in a lot of areas where just in a lot of other card games, it would be that way. It simply would. Bounty would be better than smuggle. But because our game is special and it's designed in a way where those mechanics are elevated to function in a way, like we put Hondo at D tier and we put Bosk in A, and I would confidently swap those leaders now. I'd confidently 100% say I'd put Bosk down in C, D tier, and I would put Hondo into A if not S.
That Hondo Blue deck goes hard.
I've been playing it a lot, and I gotta say, absolutely love it. Like it is... It feels good to have all the options, and it's like an evolution of what Green Blue Villain was in set 1.
Yeah.
And I think speaking of evolutions from set 1, remember when we initially played, we initially thought that Vader was going to be a really big aggro deck, and we were wrong, he's a ramp deck. But we did get our Force Red aggro deck in set 2 with Kylo.
Yeah. Absolutely, and Kylo runs really well. You see him in the gameplay for this week.
Played him before.
He runs really well in this, and it's exactly what I thought he was. This kind of dirty aggro style that steals games more than it wins games.
Oh yeah.
It's a deck that really goes, all right, and now 10 damage. You know, 10. And you're like, yeah, because I have Kylo with no cards in hand and DL and
a fallen lightsaber.
And a fallen lightsaber on him, and it's 10 damage to your base, and you're like,
Ooh, hold on, Hotshot, that's wild, but can't stop it. And I think that's really cool. I would again say that I think Kylo is on a similar level to Bosk in the sense where you probably take him to your locals and you hit the 3-1s, hit the 2-2s, and you're probably not going to get higher than that, but I think the ceiling for Kylo moving forward is higher than the ceiling for Bosk. Because Kylo just wants good aggro cards. He doesn't have a prerequisite more than that.
Yeah, because his ability is very generic in a way where it's just like, let's do it.
And if we get more cards in the future that have interesting effects like Slicer, where they're discarded during the phase or something like that, well then that just adds a benefit to Kylo. And it won't be something that's crazy OP, it'll just be nice to work with, and then we can see some cool other synergies with the decks. But I think once again, Bosk has to include bounties in his deck, whereas Kylo just wants to run cards you want to run anyway and rewards you for that because the leader's effect is simple and strong. Yeah. I'm running these aggro cards. Great. I'll discard them and give +2/+0. Why I want to play a boss deck? Okay, well you need to make 9 slots for bounties.
Yeah, exactly. And even 9 can sometimes feel like not enough.
It's a lot.
So, and then you're like, all right, well, when am I gonna, like, I have to run. Oh yeah, it's really rough. And I think I think there's a decent chance we get that 2-cost blue bounty, the 1-cost red bounty, and a 0-cost green bounty in set 3. Yellow doesn't care. You got all 3.
You know what I think's likely we could see in set 3 that I'm very excited for? I think we could see a Hondo unit. And
it's possible.
I'd
absolutely.
But I think we could also see a lot of red aggro, and I think an interesting mechanic that I think would be really cool to see in decks like Kylo is exploit. Because he already functions really well with what he's got, but by being able to just have no hand...
I hate to break this to you. Every deck works well with exploit.
He's right. But dropping just like a free Asajj
really?
is just
that
like,
good?
Is just cool. But like the reason I mention that is because the creative ceiling for Kylo is very high. Like currently there's a lot of cards that are auto includes into Kylo, but there are a lot that you can swap out for them. And the main card that I would say you only always need to have 3 of is his High Silencer, because it's just so much value with that leader it was made for him. But everything else you can branch out. You can play yellow Kylo, which could be really good with like all the Bounty Hunter, Toru, Caliban stuff. You know, you could play blue Kylo if you wanted a more mid-range build. Hell, even even run a green Kylo deck that has like Kylo ramp late game into discarding your early Force to Palpatine's return them late. Like, you've got options to build with Kylo because the creative ceiling is there, and I think that's one thing that is understated with Kylo is the fact that he's a good aggro leader, he really is. But his effect is simple and doesn't have any prerequisite restrictions. So you can have a more explorable and fun space to go with him, which makes me personally very excited to see what he's going to do in the next couple of sets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kylo's a really fun leader to be able to build around. And even I just then was like, green Kylo.
Yeah, green Kylo Force with Palpatine's return.
Could be fun.
It's been on my mind. I task you to make that one day and show me the mad scientist goodness.
I sure will. I think Kylo's one of those leaders that is going to be under one of those situations where eventually a card's going to come out being like, every time you discard a card, draw a card. And it's going to be like, Kylo's dumb.
Yep.
And it's going to be one of those situations where in like 5 sets I'm going to be like, oh, Kylo can do this combo now, and you're like,
it'd be cool to see if even if we got cards where they're like, you know, in a set where they introduce a hand discard deck, we could get cards that are like little traps to include, like, when this card is discarded, by an effect do this, and then, well, awesome. You've got tech against hand discard decks, which is really cool. But hey, Kylo gets a bunch of cool new cards because it could just be like, oh, when this is discarded, deal 2 damage. Well, don't mind if I do. Tap this, pitch this, give this +2/+0 and ping something. And that's just some cool, interesting stuff because we've already seen that with Miggs Mayfield. He synergizes off of you discarding cards, and we've seen them put that into effect with like Kylo's TIE Silencer. And then I think in the future, I personally would like to see some Afra support in the sense of cards where they're like, yeah, don't worry about it.
No.
Maybe if we get, you know, her droids, and they could be when they're placed from, you know,
your deck into your discard
when
pile.
When they're placed
in the discard pile or something.
When they're placed in your discard pile from anywhere other than the like the battlefield, do this. Yeah. So then, you know, maybe one of them could be draw a card. Then suddenly in Kylo, I'm just like, hey, pitch this, give this +2/+0 and draw a card. In Afra, I'm like, hey, it's my regroup phase, mill this, oh, draw a card, draw 2 cards. One of them could be ping 2 damage. And then suddenly I'm not feeling so, like, bad in decks like Afra, and I'm feeling even better in decks like Kylo.
Yeah, I think at the moment Kylo is going to struggle to move into a more mid-range role because of that whole thing where it's like, I want to discard and discard, but like in a mid-range deck, top decking is really rough.
Yeah.
Whereas in the aggro version, top decking isn't so bad because you're trying to get those last bits of damage in.
Which is interesting to talk about because if you can build a good red-green Kylo deck, you could probably do very well because you could early game aggro out. By the time they solve that problem, well, you pay 6 and you go, here's a Palpatine, wipe your board. Or play Vader, or play Maul.
Yeah.
Or even, one really cool thing about Palpatine's return is if you can build a deck that lasts that long, you can play Luke Skywalker for 7, and you can play Snoke for 8. Even if they're off color, you can just pay the cost for them in those decks. And that makes them interesting. Again, Kylo adds another interesting dynamic to deck building. I think that's really cool.
And I think the main thing with that is finding a way to get consistent draw into the deck, which at the moment, aggression. There are draw cards, but they're expensive and they're not like even mission briefing was used early on. But mission briefing is one of those things where it's like it costs a card in your hand. Yeah. So you're really only netting one, it costs 3 resources, which is just and an action. And that is not to be understated as well.
No. In control decks, invaluable. But in a deck that is an aggro deck, you can't afford to be wasting that time.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's just cool to see how things like this evolve. And I think that we talked about it in Command Week. But aggression cards from Set 2 have taken the role of what command cards in Set 1 had, where there's a lot of really good potential, but they just don't have a home yet. Just don't have a home.
Speaking of things that do have a home,
we're
moving on to hero aggression, which in Set 1 was its biggest player, Sabine, and in Set 2, it's changed. Its biggest player now is Sabine.
Yeah, Sabine Green, just like Set 1.
Just like Set 1. And yeah, you can be like, oh, but you just had a Darksaber. Nope.
Sabine's mid-game has become a lot more explosive. One of the big problems with Sabine is you would either win in the early game and lose in the mid to late game, but now her win rate and percentage has gone up incredibly incredibly because her mid-range just absolute power has gone up. She can now deal with threats she couldn't even dream of dealing with before, and there are two cards.
I was just about to say, there's 2 cards that have made this all possible.
Who are they?
One is the Dimmer Dome Damn Poe Dameron.
Poe, they fly now. Somehow Palpatine returns Dameron. That's him.
Is a 5-cost 6/6 that does a bunch of stuff.
Do you want a card that does everything? Congratulations.
Poe Dameron.
And you know what's really interesting as well? I think in set 3 we'll also see Anakin going in there. 5 cost 6/6 that when he attacks, if you've got 2 other units, you draw a card.
Yeah. It's certainly possible.
Nice budget option.
Being able to just play him, and he's such a threat with that 6 damage, goes up to 8 with his ability to swing. Being able to just threaten 8 damage to base is massive, and it's actually crazy.
It is invaluable against the Boba Fett matchup because they put the armor on him, and you ambush Poe in, discarding 2 cards to remove Boba Fett's armor, ping him for 2, and then kill Boba Fett with 1 swing of Poe. Yep. That is how that deck deals with Boba's armor. And not to mention, I guess the other card as well kind of deals with Boba's armor as well, doesn't it? If you can ambush it in between the armor, you can just clonk him.
Does it? No.
He can if you get in between.
No, it's one off. Killing him with the armor.
No, I mean if you get in between the equipment.
Yeah, it's just.
But Poe.
The fact that it's one off when it.
Yeah, but Poe alone is just like,
yeah.
Oh wow, you've done a lot. You've really armored up Boba Fett, and they're like, yeah, what are you gonna do? And you go, Poe, and he lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
well, no, he dies. Oh no,
no, he does not. You destroy the armor. Poe takes 4 damage back. You hit Boba, and Poe's living. And then they have to deal with Poe.
Extremely valid use of ECL there, but mainly. Poe is actually not the one used in ECL. It is Boom Wrecker. This card is goes crazy because it's one of those situations where they go, awesome. Does that have 6 health? And they go, yeah, it's got 6 health. And you go, oh, perfect. And they're like, what do you mean perfect?
I mean perfect.
Because you ECL this guy out and hit them for 5 because you don't care about your resource. You don't care about your resource.
You're Sabine. You've already flipped.
Yeah,
you've done what you need to do.
Yeah, you get rid of that resource. You deal 5 damage to it, and you go, awesome. That'll be 6 to base as you ambush to overwhelm into them.
And once again, it destroys decks like Boba Fett because they go, I'll flip Boba, and you go, awesome.
Yeah.
I will ambush Wrecker into him, and they go, but my armor, and you go, yep, smash.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Wrecker is insanely good. Wrecker hits cards like Crate Dragon. Wrecker hits cards like Luke. And most importantly, when he does that, he deals excess overrun damage to your opponent.
Yeah. It's 12 damage in total that's coming, and whatever you it's just one of those crazy situations where it's like, and even then you can be like, oh, I don't have any 6 health cards. It's like, all right, I'm going to kill that and ambush into that.
Absolutely, all of that stuff is just insane. I feel like a lot of the other hero cards this set aren't really all the red ones aren't very notable.
No, you can still see the Sabine going back to that classic 2-cost Sabine. The A-Wing, the Red 3, and the K2SO. Those things are staples in that deck.
There was only 3 new cards that really in the Red Hero that really elevated Hero up. And one of them falls in line more with a generic Rebel package than these 2 do for sheer value.
Yeah.
And the third one, which is absolutely worth talking about, is Cassian.
Absolutely. And it's a card that just goes... Oh, I won, by the way. And you're like, oh, god damn it!
There has been the amount of times that I played Sabine, and my opponent's been on 2 life, and, sometimes you win the game, sometimes you don't because of it, but the amount of times that I've sitting there and just gone, I just wish I could do it this turn. Cassian lets you. Swing with everything, your opponent claims, and they're like, cool, I'm on 1 life, I can draw this card, then you just go, hey, pay 5, here he is, swing.
Yeah.
He's the Falcon of Sabine Red.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's not to be understated. He's not crazy, he doesn't do anything absolutely off the wall, but he's a 3-cost 3/5, and that's good. It's just when you compare him to cards like Wrecker and Poe, wow, are they nuts for their cost?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those situations where, yeah, there's a couple of decent cards you can throw in there as well. Like, there's a few interesting stuff, but the card, like, it's just like Sabine uses these cards so well on top of them just being really good. Like, they fit so well into Sabine, where they fill that gap that was like, oh, I can't do anything after this point in the game,
I hit
and
this
suddenly
point, I hit a
you
brick
just
wall.
can.
Which is insane. And then the only thing is, again, a downside for people is just, Poe costs a lot of money. But as I was saying before, we look into set 3. Anakin's already a good budget replacement for Poe. Yeah, you're not getting all of the value of Poe, but just getting a 6/6 speeder is fine. But if you can get Poes, you definitely want to get Poes. And he's just being put into everything. I'm finding that when I'm building a red hero deck, I want to put Poe in. There's no reason for me to not.
Yep.
I can ECL him if I've got him. I can ambush him in with Fennec. I think it's just, like, overall, he's just...
4 more for Fennec.
Oh, true, sorry.
4 less.
Oh, anyway, I can't ambush him with Fennec, but I'll still play him. And then you've also got cards, he's running decks like Rey. Rey hand discard.
Rey Red, yep.
In that one, you don't care much for dealing the damage or removing the upgrades, but a lot of the time, just swinging for 6 and discarding a card is great.
And moving on to the new red hero on the block.
Oh boy.
Playing. What if I just played him for 4 instead?
Well, I would say that's ridiculous. Surely you'd have to take like half of his health away or something.
Well, 2 of it, a third.
Ooh. But he's still really good.
Yeah.
I'd pay 4 for a 6/4.
Mm-hmm.
That when he attacks, I do
whatever
all
I want.
of Poe.
No, absolutely. And we're talking, obviously, about Han Red, the newest kid on the block. We don't talk about Bo-Katan.
Han Solo.
Han Solo's come through the blue-red deck that's come through. Absolutely crazy. The amount of value that you get with that deck is just off kilter. And it's just one of those situations where value is value, and value will always be value. And if you can just keep outvaluing, you'll just win.
Do you like Obi-Wan Kenobi? Great. Play him a turn earlier. Do you like Luke? Great. Play him a turn earlier. Do you like Redemption? Fantastic. Play it a turn earlier. Do you like the Chewbacca unit? Play it a turn earlier. Smuggle it out. Do whatever you want. And yeah, you might be going, wow, that's a great late game. And you'd be right. But it's also got an incredibly good early game.
Yoda turn 1?
Yoda turn 1. And then, but it's just Yoda and he's taken 2 damage. Anyway, I've got all my guys out here. I've got my 2 A-wings in the sky. What are you going to do?
Force her.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll discard my red 3 and kill this A-wing.
Force her.
Oh. Okay, well, I guess I discard my K2SO then.
Yeah, kill the other one.
Oh.
How many cards in hand? 1?
1?
Yeah, right, cool.
Awesome.
Nothing on board?
Nope.
Yeah, sick. Restore 2.
That's great. And then you might be going, oh, wow, well, that's really good, but at least it's just that. And then, well, you know who's good? I think it's Ken Jarrus.
Ken Jarrus? For 3?
Pay him for 3. He's a 3-cost 4/3 that on attack will heal you damage. So play Yoda, force through your opponent, drop a
But hang on a second. I'm a red aggro deck. I got stuff like A-Wing. I got stuff like Sabine. You can't keep up with that. Except, well, you also are a red hero deck, so you just
open
have
fires and
A-Wings.
yeah, and A-Wings and red
and
threes.
Sabines.
Yeah, and then because you're a blue deck as well, you've got the capability to heal with Restore, and then you've got that late game. Well, it's not even late game. It's potentially even mid game cards like Redemption, cards like being able to. We saw it in set 1, where when you play Green Blue Luke, being able to drop an Obi-Wan a turn early into a deck like Sabine crippled them. Being able to drop a Obi-Wan a turn earlier without having to spend a turn ramping into Sabine, even better.
Yeah. But you take 2 damage, you're easier to kill.
Okay, awesome. Put 2 counters on this unit and draw a card.
Yeah.
Like, Obi-Wan's job is to be a Sentinel and die. And I can do that, but cheaper. Yeah. And buff my Kanan that's damaged to put him back up to his normal health pool. Put my Yoda who's damaged back up to his normal health pool. But they get excess damage because of it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those situations where it is, like this deck is full value town all the time, and just to the point where you're like, all right, it's fine. I have a way to do it. It's gonna drop this, but it's gonna be damaged. And he goes, all right, I'll just pay for it and play Kanan. And you go, oh right, yeah, you can. It tricks you, and then you're like, oh, you can just also just play it.
And if you're sitting there going, okay, but this deck just loses to hard control, well, you're wrong, because it's got Force Throw, and it's got Pillage, and it's got Tech.
Yep.
So you spend your early to mid game removing their cards, and in their mid game they go, awesome, awesome. Now I can pillage you, and you go, what? And then they go, yep, discard your last 2 cards, and then play Tech.
Yep.
And then you go, oh, okay, oh well,
Take down Tech.
Awesome. Well, you've just taken down Tech. Luke Skywalker. Flip on. Force Throw. Your last card away.
Yeah. The discard package in this is nuts.
Very
we run K2SOs are also coming through, which I don't actually draw any K2SOs in our game now that I'm thinking about it.
No, you didn't. I was actually scared of, like, I was preparing for him. I was scared of him, and once again, interestingly enough, depending on what deck you're in, K2SO has a no-brainer of what option you choose. In Sabine, no-brainer, you'd pick the 3 damage, but in Han, it's almost a no-brainer that you'd pick the discard.
Oh,
you're gonna deal the damage anyway.
You discard way more than you deal damage.
You're gonna want to pick the discard with K2SO's effect 90% of the time, because to be completely honest, guys, you're gonna deal the damage anyway. You're gonna get there.
Yeah.
You're gonna get there. It doesn't matter. You would
like,
rather
all right,
reduce their options in the meantime.
Previously, Hero hasn't had the best late game.
No.
So you're saying his late game's fantastic, and you're saying all these cards like Luke and Obi-Wan, and like, yeah, we're adding in Poe, and we're adding in but that wasn't really great late game cards last set. So what's changed? Why is his late game so good this set?
It's because they come out earlier. They're more explosive, and you get cards like Crate Dragon.
That's what I'm talking about. Crate Dragon is this beast of a card.
He's the payoff.
That you're it's crazy not to run in, and it's a situation where a lot of the time dropping a Crate Dragon wins you the game.
Yes.
Even more often, dropping a Crate Dragon, they use all their resources to deal with it, and then just dropping another Crate Dragon wins you the game.
There's a common concept in card games, which was first originated in the card game Magic the Gathering, which is called the curve. And this is a mechanic that denotes your cost of card ratio and the amount you have as your resources increase each turn, and how effective your deck is at snowballing and building momentum. Traditionally, decks that have a consistent curve are the decks that perform the best, because a consistent curve proves that your deck has a strong early, middle, and late game. And Han Solo, in our opinion here at the Spy Squadron, currently has the best curve in the game.
Absolutely.
He has a strong early game in units where you can damage them to play them earlier. Mm-hmm. He has a strong mid game in units where you can damage your late game units to play them earlier, or play those early game units without damaging them. And he's got an incredibly strong late game with cards like Luke, Redemption, and the payoff that you build that up to, Crate Dragon. Your opponent's sitting there the whole time going, all right, if I can only get this, Super Laser Blast, we're finally going to do it. We're finally going to clear this Luke, and I can stabilize the game, and they've dropped a Crate Dragon, I drew the Super Laser Blast, so I take 8. Yeah, and lose.
Yep. And one of the biggest things is you go, okay, that's fine. I have the health. I can take the 8. I'll overwhelming barrage. Yep. There is no deck, and I absolutely believe this. I'm not saying this is the best deck in the entire game.
It does.
It does have an issue. Like, it can lose to Sabine early game. It can lose to Boba Fett if they get the right cards.
It can stumble to aggro. It can still get outvalued by Boba Fett. It can get disrupted by the Mono Yellow Han in the set. It can get out attrition by decks like Hondo. It still has its counters.
This deck has the best recovery of any deck in this format from being board wiped. it has the best chance to immediately flip back and continue to play threats. Because this deck says, awesome, you wiped all these bombs that I played, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one.
You board wipe. And then your opponent goes, cool, thumbs up, we're at 8 resources. Pay 3 Yoda. And then you go, okay, I can deal with that. And then they go, tap, deal this damage, play Obi-Wan, play Poe, play like Mace, play Luke. And then you're like, I've just used all of my resources to get rid of this card. I've got like no cards in hand now. I'm going to draw 2 and I'll be able to remove one thing. No brainer. I'll remove this one. Awesome. Kanan. Here's Poe. Okay, well now he's got Yoda and Kanan and Poe on board.
Yeah.
And next turn...
That's alright, I got another Super Laser Blast. Hit him with the Super Laser Blast.
Crate Dragon.
It's a situation where this deck has more bombs than you have removal 99% of the time. And if you don't, it's got more bombs than you have resources to play all that removal.
And if a good player is piloting this deck, they will just outplay you. Yeah. They will. You might be like, okay, I'm finally attritioning them out. We're getting that, but they drop tech. They drop tech and they're going to draw 2 cards, and either I kill the tech and stop whatever they play from their resources, or I keep my removal and stop whatever they play from hand. It's... You have a choice to make, and Han is going to capitalize on the choice no matter what it is. You're in a bad position. That's it.
Like tech is one of those cards where played early is like, okay, we'll play them early. Like have a little bit. Smuggling them out for 4 and just being like later in the game, and then just being like, awesome, I got 2 hands.
Yep.
I have just so many options available to me.
Smuggle them out late game and play another card from your hand.
Yeah.
And then they have two kill on sites they have to deal with. And I think the big thing with Han is it's a deck that you need to beat in the early game to beat in the late game, because you either need to be a deck like Boba Fett and win the early game value to stop its snowball as easy as you can, which is the same as Mono Yellow Han. You need to be able to disrupt it, or you need to be Sabine and just beat it before you hit that point where you can't.
Yeah. And against these kind of more control decks, this reigns supreme. This is a fantastic into these control decks, because once you start dropping those crate dragons and all this value, you're good. And worst case, and we talk about all this value, but against these control decks, they just go, and they're like, "Are you gonna drop Kanan? I got this takedown," and you go, "Pay 4," and they go, "Yeah, here comes the Kanan. I'm gonna take it down." And they go, "Pillage."
Oh, well, I just got my takedowns, both of them.
Cool. Because in most control decks you're not playing those threats, and even Kira, who can kind of play those threats, doesn't really have the power to get through it. Kira's big thing is, oh my god, I can board wipe on this turn 4. Well, what did we just say? Han is the best at recouping value in the game. So if you're relying on just one board wipe to be like, yeah, and I did it, and I board wiped it, and now I can gain control,
you also have to make it there. You also have to make it there, because one thing that Kira is susceptible to is the exact same thing most other aggro decks are, and most other unit decks are. Awesome. I played a Yoda and you played a space unit turn 1, good game. Literally, good game. I win. If you're a unit-based deck, I win, because I'll force throw, even one force throw. Even one force throw is good enough to deal with that.
And then it comes through like in stuff like Kira, where they're like, all right, I'll play this Sentinel and I'll shield it. And I go, awesome, here's my Sabine.
Swing, ping the shield off.
Swing, ping the shield off, kill.
Yep. And they go, oh, but you meant to run 3 cost units and ping them for 2. And you go, meh. No.
Sabine.
Here she is. Han just has a lot of really good options. Yeah. And I think it's really cool. I think again, you can beat Han. It's if you can stop the snowball early, or you can aggro him out. I mean, in our gameplay, go check that out. You know, you can take games by getting in there. But this week's gameplay is a really good example of both of the points we just talked about: how to counter Han, and then also how good Han is if you can't get to that turn. If you hit that point and Han just goes, all right, we're in Han's highway now. It's cruisy time.
And I think one of the first game is one of the craziest ones, because you deal so much damage early, and I almost get away with it. Like, even with how much damage you dealt in that early game, I almost got away with it and
Yeah.
snuck away with some restore to heal up, and
Yeah,
it was just a case of I couldn't deal with the space in the end.
I think it's a similar thing where like I think Kylo is where Sabine was in set 1, where he doesn't have the mid
Yeah,
mid breaking. Like I think if I maybe had a way to be able to get around that like midway, and it's just but cards like Ruthless Raiders just don't do it the way that Poe does.
or Wrecker.
Or Wrecker. So it's where like Kylo is where Sabine set 1 was, where like if Kylo came out set 1, I definitely think he would have been a formidable meta deck.
Yeah.
But I think Sabine was able to evolve because she got some really good support pieces, and Kylo's stuck where she is now. So hopefully we see some movement there, and hopefully we see Sabine stagnate, please.
And we talked about it before as we move on from the hero aggression stuff into like the kind of neutral aggression stuff. We talked a lot about it in that Han deck, and uses a lot of those new neutral cards such as Pillage, obviously.
Pillage is awesome.
Pillage is just
Pillage
such
rocks.
a great card. The Pillage came out and I was like, that card's nuts.
And I said, yay! Because I love hand discard.
Pay 4, discard 2, easily done.
We got a good scope for why Pillage was going to be good because of the set 1 meta. We knew Iden was just the top dog, but we knew that Iden didn't like getting hand discarded.
Yeah.
And then we saw a card like that, and I guarantee if we had that set 1, the meta could have looked very different.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those situations where Pillage just comes through and reinforces a lot of the discard that we had in like K2SO and Force Throw, where they didn't really have a massive place in this deck.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're running the full Yoda, Obi-Wan, Kanan, Luke, right?
You're getting the Force package.
So you're getting that Force package.
And you're getting it cheaper than anyone else. You also get Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's part of that Force package. Like, your Force curve is on point. We just said that's a turn 1, turn 2, turn 4, turn 5 play.
Yeah, absolutely. And because everything's a turn early, and being able to Yoda turn 1 is so huge, because if they remove him and they go, oh, well, I can just swing 2 into him, you draw a card. You've essentially played nothing on turn 1 and forced them to, like in the aggro decks, you force them to swing into him, and there's just so much value that goes around.
If you only play the Force curve in that deck, your turn 1 is Yoda, your turn 2 is Kanan, your turn 3 is Pillage, your turn 4 is Obi-Wan, and your turn 5 is Luke.
Yep.
That's wild. Not to mention, you've also got Mace Windu's in there as well. Mace Windu is running this deck because he's good. He's just straight good. And he's also a great finisher. By the time you play him, a lot of the time you like kill this, untap him, and then I'm just going to swing your base. And it's like, that is good.
And it's one of those things where they're like, all right, I'm going to play like 3 little guys, and they go, well, boom, boom, boom.
And he's still alive, swing your base. So it's just cool stuff like that. But there's also some other neutral cards in this set that are very, very strong and very, very good. Namely, there's one double red that I really want to talk about. There's one that I think is fine. It's interesting that how it's gone, like in set 1 where we've got like one good double red, one mid double red, and one not good double red. And then there is definitely a card I'd very much like to talk about, and it is an upgrade. It's DL44. This is a card.
This is certainly a card.
This is certainly a card. This card is being run in a lot of decks. You see, if you haven't been paying attention, it's been run in 2 of the best meta decks in the game right now. Yellow Han, Mono Yellow Han, and Mono Yellow Boba. And that's because you can just pay 3 and cunning it out and put it onto stuff. But it's also just good. Like, I run it in Kylo, because you can just flip Kylo and just load him up. With load him up, load up on guns, bring your friends. But like that card's value is insane. Being able to do a miniature surprise strike that stays without using a card in your hand, or doing that at a reduced cost, is nuts. And it's quickly become a card that's incredible with cards like Toro Calican, because, well, here he is, pay 3, put it onto him, swing, hit you for 5, awesome. Pay 1, Greedo, untap him, hit you for 10. Like, that's bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those cards that really does really interesting things, and I love that how they've designed it around that kind of cunning and aggression. I think that was really, really interesting and a really cool way to do that. I think also a kind of unsung hero of of neutral red that has a lot of really interesting applications in a lot of decks is that Daring Raid. I think that's a card that has a lot of things that like it seems so simple, it seems so basic, but even in Sabine it's run as just kind of like a, and then there are two more.
Yeah, and I run it in my Kylie deck, and it was good. I feel good having it, especially in aggro decks where, like Sabine and like Kylie, you really want to eke out as much damage as you can, and that 2 damage does matter. There are points in that game where your opponent can't feel safe because they are on 2 health, and if you draw that, they lose. So it's like, cards like that are interesting, and it's got extra value because I don't know if the card would be as good if it was just ping 2 to base, but it's certainly great that because ping 2 to base or a unit. You have that value option, you have that flexibility, and for me, I think it's earned a space in a lot of decks because of it. I think that it's a very good card. I think it almost replaces For a Cause in like certain decks, but I think it's just For a Cause is just too valuable not to run.
Yeah, the ability to feel 4 damage is pretty big.
You have to run both. Like, and I think that's awesome. Like, the only non-hero card you would want to run in Sabine is that, and it burns.
Yep.
So, like, cool. Here's my For a Cause and For a Cause diet. So it's just cards like that, and then of course Crate Dragon and Pillage, 2 absolute bombs to come out of the red. They're definitely the 2 best. I would say Pillage, Crate Dragon, and Hotshot are 3 of the, like, they're probably the 3 best neutral red cards.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to talk about, just before we end the episode, I just want to quickly talk about Bo-Katan and Chaos of War. So Mono Red got a huge buff this set as well. Mono Red card is really fun to play. Han. The Han leader we were just talking about.
Yeah, Mono Red Han is actually a really cool deck.
It's actually really good. Mono Red Sabine is still really good. And one really good thing about that is Mono Red lacked a good, stable turn 1 play because you could get Wolf, and that's cool. But then your other options were like Partisan Insurgents.
Yeah.
And then, like, if you're hero, cool, you got access to A-Wing, but if you're villain, you didn't really have anything. But Bo-Katan is 2 for a 3/3 that when she's dead, when she dies, you draw a card for each base that has 15 damage on it.
Yeah. So it's one of those really interesting cards where it's like, at base value, you're like, oh, but it's just a Battlefield Marine. But Mono Red just didn't have the ability to have that kind of value of Battlefield Marine, and Bo-Katan brings it in a way where it's just like, I could also get another bonus from this, or I can just run this as a Battlefield. I'm just running this as a Battlefield Marine. If I get a bonus, awesome, I get a bonus.
Yep, it's a Battlefield Marine with more options. If the normal Battlefield Marine had a when defeated effect that was conditional, it would be more incredible than it already is. So we know it's good. So having a Battlefield Marine that goes, awesome, you are mono red, which means you're aggro, which means you want to deal damage, which means you will want to draw impulsive cards later in the game to help you your hand, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Oh, great. I'm a Battlefield Marine that buys into your game plan. I think she's awesome. Not to mention, she actually does have 2 pretty decent keywords. Mandalorian is a nice keyword to have, but most importantly, she's a trooper. And we're actually, like, I was building today, and there is a large number of troopers. And I think with 1 or 2 more sets, probably even next set with all the clones, we could very easily see a mono-red trooper deck. And you might be going like, oh, that's funny. It's not. That, like, I assure you that it will be good because you will have access to Precision Strike in that deck, which will be a great finisher when all of your cards are troopers. So you just have a 1-cost Saboteur +2/+0. Like, that will be good, especially if we see, like, I'd be very surprised if we didn't a red clone leader. Yeah. So, you know, cards like Bo give us some good interest to the future. And then once again, Chaos of War was an interesting card. I discounted it when it first came out, but now I'm seeing it and I'm like, oh, this is just a nice 2-of that I probably want to run in every, like, if I'm running an aggro deck, I don't care about taking damage equal to my hand because I'm not going to have much. But if I'm against a value or mid-range deck, they could be taking 3 to 4 damage on the top end, even 5. So it effectively becomes are 4 cores, I believe, in mono red. So if you're running mono red hero, and you run 4 cores in that as well, you get 2 copies of it. And if you're villain, well then you get access to another burn card to run with Daring Raid. So like that's fine. It's pretty good. It's not outstanding, but it's a lot better.
Yeah, it's not like the best card you've ever seen, but it's definitely there.
And Wild Rancor
Also exists
in the 3rd slot of double red.
But that is all we have to talk about for Aggression. It is very fun to play.
It's awesome. I love
brings its own, brings the danger, brings the aggro, brings everything, and I can't wait to see where this goes in future sets. I think that Aggression is a really interesting thing to play with at the moment because it can kind of go both of those routes of just being like, yes, I'm super aggro, but also there's this mid-range kind of idea of it, which is a very interesting thing that's coming together, and I'm very excited to see where it comes forward. We're going to cut it there a little bit early than usual, but we love you. Check out the gameplay, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.